Hi there! Thanks for having me. My name is Laura Santamaria and I am a developer advocate at Pulumi. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about communication and empathy across remote and distributed teams. First things first, let's talk about some basics. First, what do I mean by a distributed team? There's three kinds of distributed team that we can talk about. The first kind is the all-remote team. This is basically what we've been doing this whole pandemic. Each person is alone in whatever space they're working from. So everyone has to communicate via video or text or audio in some way, shape, or form, in some collection of those systems. So in that case, those challenges are slightly different than a distributed team. Now, a distributed team or a co-located team are the teams where perhaps 3 or 4 people, a handful of people are all in various offices. So maybe you might have a handful of people at one co-working space, a handful of people at another. You might have entire portions of a company at one space and another entire portion of a company at another. You might also have different parts of the company. It doesn't have to be that they're in a co-working space. It might be offices spread out around the world. That's a distributed company or a co-located company. And then last but not least is a hybrid format where some people are co-located and some people are 100% remote or completely remote, working from a separate space. Now, that last one is probably what a lot of us who have been remote for a very long time have experienced, where most people are in an office and then there's a handful of people who are remote. That experience can be very difficult. And again, it's a lot of different challenges for the various teams that are here. So let's now take a look at another term that I'm going to be talking about, and that's empathy. What is empathy? In short, empathy is understanding where someone else is coming from by simply placing yourself in their shoes for a moment. And you do have to remember that those shoes are different than the ones that you have. This is not sympathy. Sympathy is basically thinking about, oh, I've been in a similar situation and I can remember what that is like, therefore I can sympathize with you. Basically match up the S's, right? So you've got sympathy and you have similar situations. Empathy, on the other hand, is removing you from the equation and saying, what is this person's experience currently like? Can I sit with them in that experience? That is empathy. And the thing about empathy is that it is a two-way street. It needs to be you looking at someone else and they have to look at you. You can empathize with someone else, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the empathy really works both ways. So you need to really consider that. But to me, empathy really is the bedrock of all high-functioning teams. It's one of the biggest indicators of a high-functioning team because there's an awareness of your teammates' needs and the situations that they're coming from. The ability to come together and have an informal interaction drives a team's trust of one another, it drives alignment, and it drives understanding of a much bigger picture. And all of those things mean a team will be able to function at a high level together. So the thing is, though, is that those informal interactions are a lot easier when you're in person. Being remote is a lot different. There's a lot of problems we run into with that kind of situation. First one is language. Now we can talk about language and simply talking about English as a second language or whatever your primary language is in a company, that being the second language or third language of someone else, or fourth or fifth or sixth. But there's also body language. We can't really show body language the same way that you can in a room with other people. The context from body language feeds a lot of these conversations. We don't have that over video. Now that does make it a lot easier for people who maybe can't read body language very well. It makes it a lot easier for them to interact over this remote experience. But also, you can think of body language as a lost communication pathway when we're remote or distributed, because you can't read how someone's reacting, especially if they don't have a video camera on. Another thing that happens is, without that body language, we end up speaking over one another a lot on video chats, because you can't see that someone else has a question. And most people aren't expressive over video. They don't engage the video by exaggerating their motion. So they might raise a finger, maybe, or they might just be poised to say something. If you're sitting in a conference room with multiple people, you might notice someone shifting forward to say something, so you don't speak over them. Whereas if you're on video, you don't see that shift towards the camera. Another one is the idea that we're staring at each other on a video screen. We don't get that turn of attention toward the next speaker or the other speaker. Everyone's just staring forward. So that body language is lost. However, there's another piece of language here that I want to draw attention to, and that's that there's a language barrier around dyslexia. So in all of these text-based chats that we do when we have remote teams, sometimes people can't understand what's being said in that text chat fast enough to respond. We have, again, English as a second language. Maybe it's a little harder to formulate a response over chat versus over video. But the same thing happens for people who are having trouble reading. They need a little bit more time to do that. So that's one possible problem that some people run into. Another one is the communication mediums that we use and the meanings that we have behind all of those. Because we have a lot of communication mediums when we're remote. Whereas when we're in person, the primary one is speaking to one another. There's not as much text-based chat. There's not as much video-based chat because you're in person. It's a lot easier. So now you have to think about what mediums are you using and what can that do to different people. Text-based communication, by its very nature, is very chaotic. It's loud, the more and more people that are added to a team, and so you get information overload. It's harder and harder for people to participate. You also get technology hiccups. Let's say someone's video cuts out. Did they hear you? Were they interrupted, or did they finish their statement? All of these little bits of things that happen can mean that these communication mediums get a little bit harder to work with. Also, we deal with time zones, and obviously along with different time zones come different cultures. This one probably is pretty obvious to most people, that working across multiple time zones can be really difficult if you're trying to schedule face-to-face interactions over video. And there's this consideration of who's going to have to give up their time with their family tonight to be able to make it to this meeting. Who's going to have to get up early? And then you have to consider, well, there's different cultural things going on there too, of perhaps they have a holiday on this date. Do we consider that? How do we make that work across a remote or distributed team? This is empathy, thinking about what it's like in someone else's shoes. And then, of course, as many of us have figured out across this pandemic, if you're working remotely, there can be other distractions like family. You know, you might have a kid walking into the background, or a dog, or a spouse, or a partner. Any of that is possible. And also there's just the distraction maybe of you didn't get a chance to clean up after last night, and you're trying to keep neat and keep working, but it's really tempting to go just take a couple minutes and do the dishes. Things like that. So those distractions are still there. And then also, the thing really to remember is that across all of these things that happen, great communication is the foundation that you build a great team from. It's built on top of that bedrock of empathy. So you start at empathy, build up great communication, and from there, a great team can flourish. So let's talk about some general things that we can do to start thinking about how do we build up communication and empathy in our teams. Now, these general ideas also work for in-person situations. So we'll start general, then we'll get specifically into communication and empathy across remote and distributed teams. First things first, always start at common ground. To build up empathy with someone else, you have to understand their need. You do have to find some way to put yourself in their shoes, and sometimes that is finding something common between you. Something that you can latch onto as a springboard to start imagining, what is this person dealing with? What can I figure out? So it does sound a little bit like sympathy, except you're starting out there and then trying to build up to understanding what is that need that someone else has. Can I take myself out of this picture now and understand where we are? Also, when you're dealing with communication, starting at common ground means that you can then say, okay, I know we both want this for the company. Let's figure out a way to get there. That's how we get to negotiation. Next up, build from positive intent off of that foundation of common ground. Now, I know a lot of people get really annoyed when they hear the term assume positive intent because someone else doesn't assume positive intent for them, and it feels unfair. But we need to consider that it's a two-way street and someone needs to start somewhere. So it might be saying directly, okay, we're kind of at this point where we both agree on this basic idea. I think you have that idea in mind, and so do I. So from here, I'm going to assume that that is the thing that you have. That is the desire that you have. And I need you to assume that with me. Now let's move forward. By encouraging this two-way communication, this two-way empathy, it helps to build up everything from there. And you can always return to that. So if you get stuck, return back to common ground and then rebuild on positive intent. Now, there's this thing called radical listening. It means to not only listen with your mind, but also with your heart. You are fully present, not only in listening to the other people's words, but also to the meaning underneath those words, to the feelings, to the needs that the other person has. And that does require, by the way, not listening to respond, but listening to understand. So don't think about that retort in the back of your head. You need to listen radically. Be present in that conversation. And then show vulnerability. The other side of this empathetic listening, this radical listening, is enabling others to be empathetic with you. You need to show your feelings and your needs as part of the conversation to build up that bond. You have to trust others with your experience, trust others with your feeling, and trust others with those needs. And trust that they are going to take care of you just as you are trying to take care of them. The experiences that we have shape the outlook we have on the world. And that's why this is so important. Now, along with this, though, comes the idea that you should talk less and listen more. It's really important to sit down and listen to someone else as they try to explain something to you. So the next time you're in a meeting, this is just a little bit of homework to take home or to take to your remote office. Next time you're in a meeting, listen about twice as much as you talk and see what happens. See what you learn about the people you work with and see how you can help them grow and help them do what they need to do while also thinking about what that means for you and sharing what you have. Next up, aim for clear and concise communication. By being clear and concise, you honor someone else's need to understand what's going on. It also means that you're probably going to be a little bit more transparent. And perhaps you need to ask for clarity when someone doesn't give you clear or concise communication. Because by providing that, you ensure that everyone can be part of the conversation. Then give and get constructive feedback constantly. You always want to know what someone else is thinking, what's important for them. Did you communicate it well? Don't be afraid to ask for that feedback. Don't be afraid to say after the meeting, did everyone get what they needed out of this meeting today? That's important for us to be able to understand. You also need to respect everyone else's views and their experience, because again, those experiences help us shape those views of the world. And by respecting someone else's point of view, you get to understand them. You get to build that empathy, and they can then trust that you're paying attention, building up that trust. Then we get into conflict, right? That's all easy when it's everybody's smiling and happy. But what happens about conflict? You want to aim for team wins over personal wins. What do I mean by that? Well, back there at that common ground, you both want one thing. So in that case, you can say, well, that's the team win. We both want the product to succeed. That's the team win. Over, I managed to get this idea in, and that was my idea. That's the personal win. Aim for the team win. The team win's more important. And learn to let go of your personal win in a conflict. The idea, though, overall, is that this might be a little bit easier in person. But building communication and empathy in remote and distributed teams is hard work. And it's more so than in-person teams. So let's explore some of those specific things now. We have special considerations for remote and distributed teams. First things first, over-communicate. I can't emphasize this enough. Share as much as you can in as many places as you can. So make sure that the information that came out of a meeting isn't just on the agenda. Make sure it ends up in the Slack channels. Make sure you bring it up in other meetings. Make sure everyone had a chance to hear it. Start a company blog, internally, company blog, I should say, to make sure everyone gets a chance to hear what everyone else had to say or what everyone else had to write. Along with that over-communication, whenever you're in a meeting, you need to be present. Don't be flipping through your phone. Don't be doing something else. Yes, it's a lot easier when we're remote or distributed to multitask or attempt to multitask, because there's the argument that we as human beings don't multitask. We just context switch. By being present in the communication that you're having, by being present with someone as they're in a meeting, we build empathy. I'm going to give you a thought experiment to think about that for a moment. Imagine you're sitting out at dinner with a bunch of your colleagues. When it gets quiet, how many of them turn to their phone? How many people can't be present with the current moment, can't be present with that silence? And how does that make you feel if you just said something and you realize that everyone else is on their phone? Doesn't feel like you can build much trust with them, does it? So think about that when you sit down to a meeting as well. You want to build up that trust that people can believe you mean what you mean, and you are going to try to do the best by them and would like them to do the best by you. That's why it's important to be present. And over communicating ensures that they know that you were present enough to hear them. Along with this, you might want to consider encouraging casual communication across your company. Perhaps that's hobby channels. At a prior company, I actually did a survey of everyone in the company and said, what are your hobbies? And when everybody responded, I made Slack channels. This because we were in Slack. I made Slack channels for every single one of those hobbies and then posted them for everyone to see and said, go here, talk about things you're comfortable with. Now, the one caveat I have to encouraging this casual conversation is ask if people are comfortable first. Some folks aren't comfortable doing that, not in a workspace, and that's okay. You don't want to require that at the beginning of every meeting, everyone has to explain their current personal situation. You don't want to ask people to say, like, my kid went to school today and did X, or, my dog did Y, or, I'm sitting here at home and I'm lonely. You don't want to have to force people to have that casual communication. I have to admit, this is one of my problems with enforced water coolers, where everyone needs to come and sit in an enforced water cooler, because not everybody's comfortable sitting there. Allow people that space, especially if maybe some days they're happy having casual conversation, and other days they're tired. They don't have the spoons. They can't keep having these casual conversations on the internet. That's okay. People are allowed to be that way. And that's why I think it's important to always ask first. Ask before you try to get everyone to show up to this casual communication. If you have Donut, for example, on Slack, where it kind of pairs you up at random, maybe you need to say, like, hey, are you up to meeting today for our donut? And if someone says no, that's okay. People are allowed to opt out. Same thing for moving a meeting. Maybe you realize that the meeting that someone wants to do is going to be in someone else's evening for their time zone. Rather than just scheduling it because you're like, oh, they've always said yes before, always ask first. Assume they're going to say no and ask before you assume they're going to say yes and just do it, and means that they then don't get time with their family or with their dog or to go play video games to unwind. People are allowed to have their space. This one is much more of a direct statement. Avoid sarcasm in text. Why do I say that? There are people who can't understand that sarcasm. Again, we have body language that we're missing, that lost communication medium. You can't hear the tone of someone's voice when they're typing something in text. And some people just don't understand sarcasm. Aim for clear and concise communication. Don't be sarcastic in text when it comes to work. Save that for Twitter or whatever you want to put it on. Next up, set communication expectations. This is especially important when people are working across time zones. You need to tell people that they don't have to respond to your message on the instant messaging system. That's why we have paging systems. If it's that urgent, if it's that important, page someone. Don't assume that you can just send someone something in the middle of their evening and they have to respond. Or don't let them assume that you expect that. Tell people, what are your working hours? Set that on Slack, set that in your email, set that on whatever text-based communication, video-based communication that you have, and stick to them. Make it explicit, not implicit, that people don't have to respond when they're trying to take their evening for themselves or their morning for themselves. It's really important when you're on a distributed team to over-communicate that communication expectation and therefore ensure that people don't burn out, because we've seen that time and time again in the current environment that we're in. People feel like they can't unplug from work. So you need to do that by setting that communication expectation. Next up, along with that, set Slack statuses. If you need to step away to go make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, I'm a tea person. If you need to step away to make that cup of tea, if you need a few minutes to go deal with something with your family, things like that, take a moment, set that Slack status, set that team status, or wherever you're doing any kind of status. So that if somebody messages you on time frames that you said, oh, you can expect my communication to be open here, they know, oh, okay, someone's busy right now. Because with that also comes the idea that people actually check it. So whenever you take a look at somebody and you say, hey, I want to actually ask you a question, don't expect they're going to respond right away. And also double check that status. Are they available? Are they able to take my message? Maybe they're in the middle of doing a recording and they need a moment to get themselves together and they need to focus on what they're doing. So it's really important to set that status as part of setting your communication expectation. Now this one's a little bit of fun, and this is a challenge I have for you. Try working in someone else's time zone. One of the things that happens when you work in someone else's time zone is you start to see maybe where there's some problems. Maybe Team X isn't available in that time zone, and so whenever they need to work with Team X on a project, they can't get much work done. They maybe can get work done at early in their morning, and then they sit down and have to find something else to do. It might explain why when someone asks for a project update, they never really have anything, or they don't sound like they have as much as someone else, if you're comparing, which you should never do. But the idea is there of, oh, maybe we should make this easier. Again, communication expectations. Maybe if you work in their time zone, you realize that it's something that they deal with every day, that at this time, this job kicks off on the infrastructure and they can't get any work done. So they end up taking their break. And then you get a chance to talk with them more and find something else out cool about them. You never know. But that's why it's important to work in someone else's time zone. Now, let's switch over to why that's important to understand someone's time zone. And that is using public communication channels over private communication channels. When you're working across a distributed team, I know it's really easy to DM someone and say, hey, I've got a question for you and this, that, the other. But unlike in an office where maybe people can overhear and understand what's going on, or maybe they say, oh, I had that question too. You can't do that in a DM. You can't overhear anything. You can't engage over something. It's better to be out in public, out in the public communication channels for people who are in different time zones, for people who are doing different things. You really need to have as much communication in these outside channels as possible. Use video conferencing liberally, and that doesn't necessarily mean your video has to be on, but use it liberally so that everyone can interact with one another, so you can reduce some of that miscommunication over text. And if you do that, just remember, you need to run effective meetings. And that means having an agenda, making sure everyone knows what's going on, cutting out as much fluff as possible from the meeting. And when you run effective meetings, you can meet often as long as it's meeting quickly. Because we do get tired of having these video conferencing all day. Instead, if you meet quickly often, you deal with some of those things that would take forever to figure out over text. And if you're running an effective meeting, it gets done quickly, and then we can over-communicate that out over public channels so that everyone is involved and no one feels like they never were considered as part of the communication. But in conclusion, if you don't remember anything else, I have one last thought for you, and it's these 3 words: listen, reframe, engage. Listen radically and be present. Reframe the communication to understand where someone else is coming from and to meet their needs. And then engage as much as you can, everywhere you can, to make communication and empathy across remote and distributed teams work. Thanks so much for having me, and I'll see you on Discord.
And so now Laura's with us for a couple of Q&A questions. So Laura, one thing that could be tricky is casual communication remotely, when sometimes it's kind of like, okay, everyone's here, let's go ahead and communicate casually. Do you have any thoughts on how to sort of get those conversations started?
Yeah, there's a few different ways to do it, but I think the one big thing is to remember that not everybody's going to want to say something. Not everybody's really going to want to be engaged remotely, and that's okay. Maybe definitely providing some kind of text-based communication channel. So being ready to let those go. People feel more comfortable communicating in text sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's really the best way to continue the conversation. But it maybe providing some questions that don't require a lot of response. So, for example, I don't know how many people here have ever heard of Donut. Donut's an app that you can get in Slack that works actually really, really well for these kinds of like basic communication starting points. And so for Donut, for one company that I've been at, they actually have memes every Wednesday that you can respond to and you can start talking about. And then if you so choose, then you can start up a video channel. So it encourages that communication to start somewhere where people are comfortable, and also says that maybe not everybody's ready for that communication today. Maybe there's an outage that's taking up most of everybody's attention. So being a little bit flexible, knowing that not every day is the best day. Not every day is going to be the one that everyone has the spoons to come and chat and talk. And seeing what you can do from there.
Sure. And what's your thoughts on kind of how to balance between getting kind of enough time on camera that people feel connected, but not too much that it feels sort of overwhelming or like Zoom fatigue?
Yeah, Zoom fatigue is a really big one. I'd say so first things first, the one big thing I want to say is that this pandemic is nothing like being remote normally, right? This is definitely a different experience for everyone because you're not getting the normal FaceTime you get with your friends or your family. And so everybody's doing Zoom for everything or some kind of video conference. I don't want to just pick on Zoom, but we're going to pick on Zoom. Um, Everybody's using it and everybody's kind of getting tired of it. And if you're not used to staring at a camera all day, even if you are, it's a little much. I do know some people have been putting like little googly eyes on the camera to try to make it feel like you're talking to somebody. But even then, so when you're dealing with normal remote world, what I'd say is that encourage having spaces for people to go talk on video. Encourage that. Uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Encourage people to turn on their video when they can, if they're comfortable. Sometimes that face to face time is it. Right now, people aren't comfortable doing it. But I guarantee you, when we go back to getting a chance to see our friends, getting a chance to see our family, and not having to think about how do we deal with everything, what we're going to end up seeing is more people are going to be willing to turn on their camera because they're not going to be just so tired of seeing themselves that way. Also, maybe a little bit of explanation on how to hide your video while you're looking at everyone else, because a lot of people hate seeing themselves on camera. They really don't like it, and so they stop putting their camera on. Understandable, not everybody's comfortable with that. So, working on ways to encourage people to let their camera be on for other people to see them, but not necessarily having to see themselves is another thing that I would kind of encourage to encourage that face-to-face communication. But I'd also say, like, it's okay to say maybe people if people have company phones, hold your meeting, hold your one-on-one instead of it being face-to-face virtually, video-wise, have it be on the phone and go take a
Mm-hmm.
walk. Something like that. That might help too. So,
Great. Do you have any other thoughts on how to make remote communication accessible for a variety of people?
yeah, this is kind of one of those things that I think about a lot.
Mm.
I mentioned a little bit about the avoid sarcasm text. Not everybody can really understand it. Remember that people have different cultures. Remember that you have English as a second language or people who have dyslexia. They have some trouble with text-based communication. Um, One thing that I know is um, if you reading, actually light themes help more based on research than dark themes. So making sure that your platform, whatever you're working on, does have a light theme. It helps people with reading comprehension who have some trouble, or people like me that actually have really, really bad eyesight and need that extra bit of help that it can have. So that's something to think about. Also, kind of read it through a filter of if I were reading this and I need to translate it through Google Translate, how accurate is this going to be? How clear is it going to be? Am I using idioms, which are basically saying something that's maybe local to my area? Uh, so for those of you who don't know where I am, I'm in Austin. So if I'm talking about tacos and breakfast tacos, that means something here. I don't think it means the same thing in Boston. So that's something just to consider is that maybe the analogies that I'm using and the idioms that I'm using aren't ones that are familiar to everybody else. So I need to go back and kind of consider what's going on. So that's just something else that I'd say for accessibility. But really it's ensuring that everyone can have an equal place at the table. And whatever you need to do that, there are so many tools out there, but you know, consider what it's going to sound like on a screen reader. So that means yes, use punctuation. Like I know people don't want to, but 100% use punctuation because that's how a screen reader reads it. If you ever get a chance, go take like a latest chat that you've had with a friend, dump it into a screen reader and see what it sounds like. Can someone understand it? I know it sounds funny, it sounds hilarious, but at the
Mm.
same time, like, does it make sense? Can somebody really follow what's going
Right,
on?
right.
Or does it all kind of
Okay.
mash together in this huge long run on sentence that makes no sense? So,
Yes. All right.
yeah.
So, had a question from Discord. If my team
Ooh.
has a few people who slack their stream of consciousness and a few people who might take 15 minutes to develop a more thought out response, how can I reconcile those two communication types so the conversation flows for everyone?
Oh, yeah, that's a really great question. I have to admit, I'm more the kind of person that needs 15 minutes. And what I'd say, and I actually work with people who do the stream of consciousness discussion. What I'd say is, as a manager, I would interject a question that would try to kind of hold back the conversation a little bit or, you know, encourage people that that little typing notification is actually really important. So if it might be a bit of a coaching situation where as a manager, you may need to coach the person who's more of a stream of consciousness typer that if they see somebody typing, maybe they need a minute and they need to kind of pull back a little bit and need to see that typing. And meanwhile, the person who takes 15 minutes, maybe help them understand that this person who is maybe putting out a stream of consciousness thought, this is how they think, and you don't have to respond to every single thing that they say. Only think about the things that are the really important bits and understand they're just kind of typing to fill in the space, right? Um, and then the last one, if you're somebody who just kind of needs both, like you're not the manager, you're just in this team, um, it really helps to actually take a step away from the computer. Go get a cup of tea. I keep saying tea. I know everybody's probably coffee. I'm a tea person. But the ritual of making a cup of tea calms down my brain. And so for me, actually stepping away from the keyboard, doing that, and then coming back, half the time the decision's already kind of been solidified a little bit, and I can add my 2 cents without feeling like I missed everything.
Hmm.
So part of it is your manager, part of it is just kind of figuring out the best way to deal with it on your own. So, but it's a really good question. It's a very hard thing to figure out for teams.
Great. Well,
So,
thank you so much, Laura. Um,
yeah.
Laura will be with us afterwards in breakouts. You, for those of you listening, you can find the Discord breakout under the breakouts heading, and make sure to look for the audio icon under breakouts.